Hello fellow window cleaners. It's a bit of a wet and windy Wednesday afternoon. It's horrible conditions for cleaning windows, so I'm in my workshop where I'm doing a few odd jobs, and one of the situations I've got at the moment is one that you'll be familiar with if you own a Gardiner pole. I think you can see that, although the clamps are done up, the pole is actually swiveling at the top here, and it's only the top, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch of the section where the clamp is always done up that has worn away a bit. If I clamp it further down, absolutely rigid, no problem at all. But this little bit at the top where it's always clamped up is worn away, and I need to sort that out. What I'm going to do is to rebuild this section using some epoxy adhesive. I've done it before, it's lasted about a year, but it's time to do it again as it's spinning again. So just put that aside for a second. So number of tools I shall be using for this. Firstly, I need to just roughen the end up, so I've got a bit of wet and dry sandpaper. Need to degrease it. Product you'll all be familiar with. Good old PVCU solvent cleaner that we use for cleaning mucky window frames. Everbuild brand, you get it from Toolstation. Brilliant stuff. Some epoxy glue, which actually happens to be the same Everbuild brand. I got this from a local shop, but you can get it widely available. It's the same as Araldite, only half the price. That's the 2-pack epoxy that I'll be using. You can use Araldite. And then I've just got half a wooden clothes peg here, which is what I'm going to use to spread the glue with. So the first thing I'm going to do is just roughen this up a little bit to give a good key for the epoxy to stick. Don't need to be too fussy about it. It really is only just to clean it up a bit. And then I've got a bit of rag here. Happens to be a bit of old scrim, you know, from my trad days. I still do trad insides, but I don't do anything. And I'm just going to degrease that to make sure that the epoxy sticks really, really well. Get off any loose carbon dust. There we go. And I'm just going to use the scrim to dry that off. And I don't have to waste any time waiting for it to dry out. By the time I've mixed the glue up, that will be fine. So mixing the glue up, very straightforward. Just using an old jam jar lid here, or coffee jar. Only need a tiny bit, 2 little bits, about 1 inch long. Just need the same quantity of glue and hardener. Just going to mix that together with the old bit of a clothes peg, and then all I need to do is just to paint this on the worn section. Now it's quite important to try and get it as evenly as you can. You could use a paintbrush, but it sort of knackers the paintbrush really. And so I'm just smearing that on there. You only want the smallest amount, because the epoxy when it sets is actually quite hard, and if you put too much on, you just end up having to take it back off again when it comes to fairing it in. So I'm just slapping it on really. The key is to try and get it nice and even, because at the end of the day you want to end up with a section that is round, the same shape as the rest of the pole. I've got that quantity almost spot on. So I'm just painting that on there. You don't want to get any lumps or bumps, because then you've got to sand them off. So I'm just carefully spreading that around. And this stuff goes off in 5 minutes or so, so you've got to work quite quickly. There's no point in mixing up a lot. If you've got the whole pole to do, I've just got this one section, but if you've got the whole pole, there's no good mixing up enough epoxy to do the whole pole, because it will have gone off before you've had a chance to to get the lot done. I can already feel that's beginning to harden. Just put the last, smear the last bit on there. Lovely job. Sorry, that's gone off camera, isn't it? Didn't help you much, did it? That's what comes of trying to do this thing single-handed, not having a professional on hand to wield the camera. Anyway, you can't see that very well because the light's not great in here, but I've painted an even coat round the worn section there, and it's just a case of now letting that dry for a few minutes. I'll come back, go and have a cup of tea, come back and show you how we fare that in. Well, I've been and had my cup of tea and the glue has gone off, but it's not as hard as I'd like it to be. It's a bit cold today, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a rev with a hot air gun on the very low setting. I don't want to cook it too much. And I'm just going to play a bit of warm air around that, because I need to be able to smooth this up now, and I don't want to it not being hard enough and be sticking to the sandpaper. There's nothing very exciting happening here, so I'm just going to pause the recording again and then I'll pick it up again when there's something else to see. The glue is still not really hard enough, but as I was turning it round with the hot gun on it, I did notice there was just a little bit of a dribble here where the epoxy has run down a little bit before it's cured. So I've just taken, this is a scraper blade from a 4-inch scraper, and I'm just very gently shaving away any excess that's run down, whilst the epoxy is still a little bit on the soft side, because once it sets hard it's very difficult to do much with it. It's just, I think it's partly because it's such a cold day. Epoxy really wants about 12-15 degrees to go off quickly, preferably 20, and it's only about 8-9 outside at the moment, so I think it just ran down a little bit more than it would have done on a warmer day where it would have cured a bit quicker. Anyway, that's cleaned that up nicely, and now I'm just going to give that a bit more with the hot gun to try and get it nice and hard before I try sanding it. This is the Gardiner SLX pole that was spinning earlier on. We epoxied it up at the top here to build up the worn section and stop that spinning. The epoxy has now dried and has gone quite hard. We just need to it's not bad, it's pretty smooth, but I just need to fair it in a little bit. And to do that I'm going to use some wet and dry sandpaper. You could use one of these foam wet and dry sanding blocks, but I haven't got any left. This one's knackered, I've been using it on the boat. But I've got some wet and dry sandpaper and I'm just going to wrap it round the block. It's quite important to use not just sandpaper with the wet and dry paper in your hand, because you then don't sand it evenly and you need to operate it wet. It's no good doing it dry. But if you try and do it with your hand, you're not going to get it even, and you're probably going to rub away some of the pole where you haven't built it up. And the epoxy is much harder than the carbon fibre pole, so you'll rub the pole away faster. So I've wrapped my wet and dry paper around my foam block, which is just about the right width, and I'm just gently going around there, rubbing off any high points. It's not going to need very much. really isn't, because I didn't put too much on in the first instance. I think that's almost going to do it. The thing is not to take off too much at once. What you want is there to be no appreciable difference between the main pole and the bit you've repaired. So I've adjusted the clamp, wrong one, clamping it on the pole. That's not quite tight enough. Adjust the clamp up. That's the point where it's now quite tight, it's not turning. If I turn it up here, yep, there we go, rock solid, it's not turning anymore. But I can just feel the transition there, so I think there's just a little bit more sanding off to be done to get it spot on. You don't want to be using too coarser sandpaper. I'm actually using 600 grit, which is very fine because it's what I've got. Well, I think anything from about 180, 200 upwards is fine. You don't want to be using sort of 60 or 80 because you're just going to strip too much off. That feels pretty good. I'll just wipe any slurry away. Tighten the clamp slightly more. That's it. Perfect. Back to work tomorrow. And no pole spinning.